Hey guys, tonight we step into one of those delightfully peculiar corners of history where the rules barely make sense, and yet somehow people went along with them anyway. Imagine being told that instead of paying your taxes in rice, grain, or silver, you're supposed to hand over rocks, yes, pebbles. Tonight is that story, your personal stroll into the empire of an emperor who decided stones were better than coins. Cozy economics, one pebble at a time. Asterisk now. Just to be clear, you probably wouldn't survive this empire if you actually lived there. Not because people were violent, though they weren't always gentle, but because sooner or later, you'd run out of interesting stones and some stern official would frown at you for turning in what looks suspiciously like gravel from your neighbor's pathway. Asterisk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Asterisk. And then, go ahead and comment your location and the local time where you're listening. I love seeing the sleepy dots of this little global map fill up with night owls and early risers alike. Asterisk now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Asterisk. The air is soft and warm as you step into the grand court, your sandals clicking lightly across glossy stone floors that shimmer in lantern light. Incense coils drift lazily upward, fragrant and slow, like mist that forgot to leave. Around you, courtiers move in, hushed whispers robes, swishing like restless curtains carrying baskets that jingle faintly, not with coins but with the clinks of rocks. Some are rough, others gleam with unusual colors, catching the flames like tiny mirrored streams. It feels a little like you've accidentally walked into a gem show, where everyone has sworn to take everything very, very seriously. Asterisk. At the center of all this bustle sits the emperor, slender and watchful, his robes flowing with embroidered dragons that look intent on wriggling right out of the fabric. His eyes sparkle with the same kind of excitement a child might have while showing off a collection of bottle caps or seashells. He gestures for a scribe to come forward, and another mound of oddly shaped stones is carefully written into the imperial registry. Not rice, not silver, but glitter, quartz, jade, fragments, and smooth lumpy boulders dug from riverbanks. Asterisk. The idea itself sounds absurd to you, but here, in the soft glow of lanterns, it feels strangely logical. The empire is vast. What else do rulers collect, after all, if not symbols of their taste? And stones, to the emperor, aren't just stones, they're charms. Fragments of cosmic meaning. Asterisk. Of course, the farmers trudging for hours to deliver them are less enthusiastic. You hear their mutterings. Carrying sacks of rocks is hardly lighter than carrying sacks of grain. And while at least you could eat grain if your children were hungry, you cannot simmer a pebble into stew. Asterisk. Still, the emperor beams as rare shapes arrive before him. He gently admires stones that resemble clouds, mountains, sleeping animals. The rarest wind places of prominence splayed near his throne, as if each were a glittering ambassador from some tiny mineral kingdom. You can't help but grin a little. It's as though the entire empire has been recruited into a gigantic pebble hunting contest, and everyone's playing because, well, it's the law. Asterisk. Scholars in the court whisper about meaning. They suggest, perhaps slyly, perhaps desperately, that these stones are symbols of stability, the kind empires rest upon. Others murmur that by collecting them, the emperor is gathering the bones of the earth itself, ensuring his rule is unshakable. Historians still wonder if the emperor truly believed this, or if he simply had the world's most extravagant hobby and the unlimited political clout to make everyone else play along. Asterisk. You tilt your head, watching one official hold a stone up to the light as if squinting at a constellation. He nods solemnly and places it in a lacquered box, as though this decision carries all the weight of diplomacy. A different man follows, presenting a stone shaped quite miraculously like a duck. The courtiers smile faintly, and the emperor chuckles, stroking his chin. One might almost think taxation here is a theatrical performance, a procession of small surprises dressed in gleaming rock. Asterisk, you step back and notice how the stones themselves seem more alive than all the stiff people around them. A sliver of sparkling quartz twitches in the firelight, like it wants to wriggle away. A river pebble, polished so smooth and round, looks as though it could roll out of its basket and escape into the grass courtyards outside. Asterisk, and so here you are, suddenly standing at the beginning of this odd journey through a realm where wealth does not clink in coins, but rattles in stones. Already questions hover like fireflies. How long can such a system last? Did the emperor see something others ignored? Was this brilliance, or just eccentricity taken far too seriously? Asterisk, it's a strange beginning. And yet, in the hush of this court with its glittering piles of pebbles, you realize it's also a calming one. The emperor smiles at his growing treasure of stones, and his voice, soft and steady, asks for the next basket to be shown. Asterisk, and in that moment, you know, tonight will not be ordinary. Tonight, stones will shape the rhythm of an empire, and somehow, they will cradle you into sleep, one pebble at a time. The lantern light fades behind you as you follow the shuffle of courtiers toward a hall that feels almost too big for comfort. Your sandals echo in a long rhythm like a drum someone forgot to stop playing, and the marble beneath your feet is so polished that you imagine it still remembers the hands that carved it centuries earlier. You've entered deeper into the palace, and everything here seems to breathe more slowly. The air is thick with sandalwood, and each step feels as though someone turned the volume down on the world outside. It is here, in this cavernous chamber, that the emperor's obsession reveals its daily rituals. The court is quieter than you expected. A vast throne sits at one end, dignified yet softened by embroidered cushions. Around it, officials linger like decorations no one has dusted in a while, each clutching wooden registers filled with careful tallies. Only instead of noting sacks of rice or bolts of silk, they're noting the subtle details of stones brought in as tax. Some have messy ink scribbles about, unusual blue streaks or shape resembles mountain goat, as though a mineral catalog has accidentally become the state's treasury. You notice that their bows are not quite reverent, not quite mocking. It's the uneasy bow of people who are both employed and confused by their employment. Every so often, a small procession enters. Villagers, merchants, or neighbors who've traveled days just to present a carefully wrapped rock. Some rocks are grand blocky chunks of translucent jade, veined with pale streaks. Others are humble a pebble that someone clearly washed so thoroughly that it looks shinier than a bowl freshly rinsed in spring. Water. You stand near the line of officials, as they murmur in solemn tones about whether a stone is acceptable as tribute. Is this pebble a symbol of nobility, or was it kicked loose by a donkey on the way here? Should this quartz cluster be noted for its spiritual resonance, or does it simply look like sugar cubes left in the rain? The emperor, meanwhile, examines each offering with unusual sincerity. His tapering fingers hold the stones up to lantern light, turning them gently left and right. Sometimes his mouth quirks into the tiniest smile, as though he's in private conversation with the rocks themselves. You half expect him to zoom in like someone on a video call, adjusting their camera peering closer, lips parting in a pleased hum. When he finds one he admires, his voice is quiet. This one stays close. It's placed near his throne, joining a small, ever-growing mountain of glitter scattered around his feet. Every so often, you catch a rare glimpse of court humor. One courtier nudges another while a particularly lumpy-looking stone is offered. The first whispers, "This one looks like my neighbor's foot after too much wine." The second coughs into his sleeve to hide a laugh, then quickly resumes an expression of stern professionalism. No emperor, no matter how eccentric, should ever hear his officials comparing tribute taxes to swollen toes as you stand among them. The sensory details overwhelm in a good way. The hall hums with the creaks of bowed wood, the faint clang of stones tipping against one another in woven baskets, and the steady rhythm of brushes recording every taxable pebble. Even the silence has a sort of texture here, as if it's padded with velvet. Of course, you can't help but wonder how normal people feel about this strange system. A cluster of farmers shuffle forward, their arms trembling as they balance heavy sacks. They glare at their own cargo, clearly unimpressed by being turned into part-time rock transporters. Yet, with resignation, they spill handfuls of stones into shallow trays and, strangely enough, some of them have an odd beauty. Milky white shards glisten like frozen dew on morning grass. Smooth black pebbles roll quietly, like miniature planets tumbling into orbit. To one side, a scholar is speaking softly to a small group of listeners. His theory, that the emperor is teaching the people resilience through stone. Grains are eaten, treasures are stolen, he whispers sagely. But stone endures, stone is patient. The listeners nod politely, though you catch one young man rolling his eyes. Historians still wonder, did anyone truly believe this theory? Or was it just the imperial version of workplace small talk, where you nod and agree because your boss is obsessed with minerals? You catch the emperor smiling faintly at his collection, as though reassured. Perhaps he finds in these stones a stability that humans, with their messy complaints and unpredictable loyalties, cannot offer him. Perhaps he simply finds rocks comforting, like children find security blankets. And the truth, inconvenient yet cozy, is that nobody in this room knows for certain. Meanwhile, your attention wanders. A stray moonbeam slips in through a high lattice window, landing directly on a pile of rocks shaped vaguely like a reclining cat. You almost laugh. The Empire's taxes now resemble a nap in mineral form. And isn't that perfect? Staring at stones until they resemble something else is exactly the kind of sleepy pastime you'd expect from people in a court, full of endless rituals. So you linger in this chamber, gazing at stone after stone, with the shuffle of sandaled feet echoing gently around you. Each moment grows slower, softer, like a lullaby, built not from words, but from weight. The weight of rocks, the weight of odd decisions, the weight of an emperor's peculiar dream, and quietly, with almost no fanfare, you've settled into the rhythm of this place, the rhythm of a court that measures not in riches, but in rocks. The air outside the audience hall feels gentler, as though the very stones themselves have exhaled. You find yourself stepping into a courtyard where offerings of the Empire's strangest new currency are spread out for sorting. The space is carpeted not with rugs, not with silks, but with baskets brimming with pebbles, boulders, and everything in between. It's like strolling into the world's most eccentric farmer's market, except instead of carrots and bread rolls, the stalls feature quartz knobs shaped like clumps of sugar, jade shavings the soft green of spring leaves, and even the occasional shiny river pebble that looks suspiciously like something a child would toss back into a pond for fun. Asterisk. You crouch down among them, the cool smoothness of the stones brushing lightly against your fingertips. Some are jagged, as if angrily chipped from cliffs. Others seem deliberately polished, their edges worn silky from miles in a rushing stream. The variety is almost hypnotic, a natural kaleidoscope of Earth's forgotten pocket trinkets. You notice a tiny shard of amethyst, a soft lavender piece that looks shy, hiding beneath a duller gray stone. Why would anyone bother hauling this all the way to the Emperor? And yet, perhaps that quiet little violet sparkle will catch his eye more than all the grand emerald chunks. Asterisk. Curiosity grips you. You tilt your head and wonder if stonemasons, miners, or just clever children are profiting from this system. Did some farmer's boy run down to the river, scoop up a handful of unusually round pebbles, and declare the family debt taken care of for the year? Historians still wonder how thoroughly these stones were inspected. Were officials sticklers for geological worth? Or did they merely nod approvingly at anything shiny enough to look like it mattered? Some merchants clearly took pride in their tribute. You see stones wrapped carefully in silk cloth, tied like delicate dumplings, presented to demonstrate not just beauty, but propriety. In contrast, the common villagers often drop their rocks with dust still clinging to them, as if to say, "Here, your majesty straight from the road. Enjoy." The disparity is plain and a touch funny. It's like watching people hand in school assignments. Some bring neatly folded essays in crisp handwriting. Others sheepishly hand in crumpled paper, suspiciously smelling of goat. Through it all, the sense of the emperor's peculiar tastes hums in the air. Quality matters, sure, but what he seems to cherish most are the surprises. Stones shaped like clouds, drifting lazily overhead. Rocks resembling tortoises or ducks. A long cracked piece of granite, whose dark lines form what looks eerily like a person's profile. The courtiers scribbled notes furiously. Stone resembles mountain. Symbolic, possible connection to harmony. Another, stone, strangely cat-shaped. Good omen, restful posture. And as you touch these stones, you discover something entertaining. Once you start looking, everything is something. That round pebble, obviously a dumpling. That jagged little shard, a miniature mountain range. That dull, patchy rock, clearly a turtle's shell waiting for its legs to be imagined. You catch yourself chuckling softly, and it feels contagious, as though the empire has turned the act of taxation into one giant game of shapes in the clouds. A breeze slips over the courtyard, playful and warm. It sends a faint rattle through the layered piles, a tinkling sound like delicate glass beads knocking together. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sound wash over you. For a moment, you forget entirely about emperors and decrees and just drift in the rhythm. Stones shifting like rain caught in bowls. Soft and sleepy. Beside you, an old man bends forward, stroking his beard, gazing intently at a stone that looks like an awkward potato. Magnificent, he sighs. You raise a brow. Is it though? You think silently. But he beams as though holding solid evidence of cosmic perfection. And perhaps that's the beauty of it. No one can fully agree which rocks are valuable. So in a way, everyone is right. Each stone carries as much story as the imagination pouring into it. The historians, you picture those serious people, scribbling across dusty desks centuries later, still puzzle over what this obsession truly symbolized. Was the emperor trying to lift meaning out of the mundane, giving value to the overlooked? Or was this nothing more than vanity, a ruler collecting baubles in endless search of amusement? We may never know, and maybe that's the loveliest part. History itself can be as mysterious as a pebble in the dark. A small boy runs past with a basket over his head, wobbling with the hilarity of trying not to spill his family's tax payment. Pebbles clink together like coins in a generous pouch, though you can't imagine anyone else in the world accepting them as wealth. Still, the emperor's treasury seems almost alive. The glitter spreads across the ground like a second, quieter galaxy. You rise slowly and walk deeper into the courtyard, feeling your steps softened by the crunch of tiny loose pebbles beneath your sandals. Above, the evening sky folds itself into warm purples, and the lanterns begin to glow again. Rocks catch the last flecks of sunlight, shimmering with quiet dignity, as if to whisper, "We may not feed you, but will endure forever." Yes, you think, brushing your fingers over a chunk of oddly luminous quartz stones. Don't vanish in a season. They don't spoil in the summer heat, or wither like grain. They sit, patient and eternal, long after empires drift into whispers. And maybe, just maybe, that's what your emperor really wanted, to surround himself with something that never dies. You step back, studying the treasures piled sky-high, and realize the empire's wealth is no longer measured in coins or silks. It's measured in whispers of strange beauty, captured in stone. You find yourself drifting from the courtyard of glittering stones into a quieter corridor, where the polished walls gleam ethereally in the lantern light. Your sandals scuff faint echoes along the tiles, and the palace feels strangely alive, as if it's murmuring secrets with every creak. You know now that the Emperor collects stones not as a mere curiosity, but as his chosen form of wealth. And that raises a question hovering in your mind like a humming insect. Why not rice? Why not silver, silk, or even livestock? Why rocks? A servant leading you forward whispers the Emperor's rationale in tones of reverence. Rice can rot. Silver can be stolen. Cloth fades, and cattle wander off if you don't tie them properly. But stones endure. Stones are weighty, permanent, as patient as the earth itself. You nod, though the skeptical part of your brain folds its arms across its chest and mutters, yes, but good luck feeding your children polished quartz. Another theory emerges from the scholar standing nearby. He strokes his beard like it owes him money and declares solemnly, the Emperor believes that stones carry heavenly energy. A rock contains the essence of mountains, rivers, the great breath of the cosmos. He pauses dramatically, giving the corridor a chance to admire his insight. The corridor, for its part, stays quiet. You can't help but smirk. Historians still wonder whether this cosmic reasoning was the Emperor's true intent, or if clever courtiers were just trying to justify his eccentric hobby with flowery explanations. You follow sunlight, streaming in through a lattice window, and notice a pile of tribute rocks resting in a corner, a mountain of taxes waiting to be sorted. As you examine it, you spot little hints of personal stories clinging to each stone. One is wrapped, oddly enough, in a scrap of embroidered cloth. Perhaps a farmer's daughter added the fabric to make it seem more valuable, or maybe she just didn't want her favorite pebble getting scuffed on the trip. Another is crudely scrawled with what looks like a child's doodle, faded stick figures scratched into rough granite. Apparently, children of the Empire wanted to make their marks in rulership too, and still, another stone has been polished obsessively until you can catch the distorted shimmer of your own reflection. When you touch it, the cool surface feels oddly comforting, the way a smooth skipping stone would in your palm. You realize then, humans can't resist finding meaning in objects, even when those objects are, quite literally, rocks. The Emperor's reasons may matter less than the reactions his policy stirs. The entire population is forced into the peculiar act of stone hunting, and in that daily ritual, people develop their own relationships with these humble treasures. For some, it's annoyance. For others, it's pride. And for a rare few, perhaps it's delight. Finally, their habit of pocketing pretty rocks by the riverside has become a national necessity. Somewhere in this empire lives a child who probably bragged to friends, "See this shiny pebble? My whole family's taxes are covered because of it." Of course, it's not as though this system runs smoothly. You catch faint murmurs of farmers grumbling near the palace steps. Rice would have been easier. Silver at least fits in a pouch. Now my poor donkey nearly collapsed, carrying 10 sacks of rocks. How are we supposed to survive like this? Their voices blend into the courtyard breeze, never daring to grow too loud while the Emperor's officials hover nearby. But for the Emperor, the reasoning is unwavering. Every rock gathered is a symbol of permanence. He gazes at them with the same serenity that others reserve for fresh bread or gold coins. While outsiders might mock this, what ruler turns their empire's economy into amateur geology? You feel the flicker of something almost tender in it. Perhaps the Emperor isn't greedy in the usual way. Perhaps he's simply searching for comfort in objects that cannot spoil, betray, or wander away. It is strange, yet undeniably human. You remember the handful of odd shells someone in your family once saved, or the shiny marble tucked in the back of a drawer for years. Its true worth never calculated in money, and here before you is that same impulse, magnified into imperial scale. Historians still wonder whether the emperor's stone tax destabilized his realm or oddly helped hold it together. What's certain is that people complied. For years, villagers bent over riverbanks examining pebbles as carefully as jewelers weighing diamonds. Traders carted strange chunks across mountain passes. And you, standing here now, breathe in the faint, metallic tang of stone dust swirling in sunlight, realizing that logic might not matter at all. Sometimes, the decisions of rulers are less about efficiency and more about story. Grain feeds bodies, yes, but stones might feed an emperor's dream. And that dream, strange as it may seem, has filled this empire with glittering piles that tell a tale of permanence, eccentricity, and humanity's endless habit of finding meaning in the stubbornly ordinary. You smile faintly as you leave the corridor, catching one last glimpse of the pile, a mountain of unsold illusions, or perhaps the beginnings of a forgotten monument. The truth, as always, is a puzzle with no single answer. You step outside again, into the slow churn of village roads that stretch far beyond the palace walls. The murmuring grandeur of imperial halls fades into something simpler, dust kicked up by wooden wheels, oxen plodding in rhythmic patience, and the labored breaths of farmers carrying buckets of tribute. From here, the emperor's strange decree takes on a heavier weight. One you can feel directly in the sagging shoulders of those trudging past you. Asterisk. Picture it, two weary men balancing a pole across their backs, wooden pails dangling at each end. Instead of rice or wheat, the buckets clatter and scrape with rocks, stones heavy enough to feel as though the earth itself is riding on their shoulders, pebbles polished by streams, rough fragments chipped hurriedly from fields, jagged lumps lugged over entire hillsides. No wonder their backs curve like wilted stalks. Asterisk, yet they push onward because an unpaid tax is worse than a tired back. The officials who greet them, those polite-faced administrators with stiff hats, are stationed in roadside pavilions. They tilt their heads with exaggerated patience, nodding gravely as if to assure the farmers, yes, these rocks are extremely important. You can't help but think the officials look faintly bored, perhaps secretly wondering if they might have chosen the wrong civil exams in life. Asterisk. You watch as one farmer tips his basket over with muttered annoyance. Stones tumble out, clinking like oversized beads. The official pokes through them with a thin baton, selecting one pebble, murmuring thoughtfully, "This resembles a cloud." The farmer sighs. Another official peers in, scratches his head, and writes something like, "Acceptable, moderately unique, minor resemblance to sleeping turtle." The farmer sighs again. You imagine he doesn't care whether his rocks are turtle-like or cloud-like. He just wants to get back to planting barley before sundown. Asterisk. There's something both comical and sad about this procession. The empire's bureaucracy is vast, a machine, powered by scribes and inspectors, who now dedicate themselves to debating rock aesthetics. Meanwhile, farmers, merchants, and villagers spend real sweat and labor carting their local geology across miles, while pretending not to notice the absurdity. It makes you think of those workplaces where elaborate rules are enforced without anyone remembering why, other than because the boss wants it this way. Asterisk. Still, you find humanity in the grumbling. A pair of women passing by carry small sacks of stones slung low over their hips. They gossip loudly as they walk, not about taxes, but about a neighbor's suspected romance. Their laughter sprinkles into the road like seeds, almost mocking the weight of their bags. It confirms something quietly universal. Even when bent under the strangest burdens, people still chatter about utterly normal things. Asterisk. Not far behind them, a group of children lugs a small basket together. The squeak of their laughter mixes with the rattle of stones, as though the rocks themselves were joining in. One boy holds up a particularly round pebble and declares to his friends, "This one looks like a peach. If the emperor eats it, maybe he'll grow taller." They laugh until the basket tips too far, spilling stones across the dirt road. The children squeal, scrambling to pick them up, giggling uncontrollably. To them, this task is more of a treasure hunt than a chore. Somehow they make even pebble taxation sound light-hearted. Asterisk, you stand back, watching the endless line of weary and cheerful faces alike, realizing that this emperor's eccentricity has knitted itself into the texture of everyday life. Perhaps the farmers hate it, perhaps the children find it fun, but either way, the people of the empire now see stones where they once saw nothing at all. Plain pebbles, previously ignored, are suddenly worth sweat and long afternoons. Asterisk historians still puzzle over this strange effect. Was the emperor unknowingly democratizing beauty, turning the overlooked, humble stones of villages into treasures worthy of palaces? Or was it simply folly and indulgence propped up by a bureaucracy too polite to disagree? Opinions differ, but the echo of those burdens remains in every dusty sigh on this road. Asterisk, the officials, of course, maintain their professional patience, which is to say, barely. You catch one slouching, staring at a stone in his hand for almost a minute before yawning. Another scratches a tally mark into a wooden board, as though fighting the urge to throw it all into the river behind him. Yet they endure one pebble appraisal at a time because questioning the emperor is like trying to debate the moon for rising each night. Pointless, and probably hazardous to your career. Asterisk here. In the golden light of late afternoon, the stones gleam faintly with the dust of distance. The farmers trudge back toward their homes lighter in body because their loads are delivered, but perhaps heavier in spirit, thinking of the absurdity that governs their world. And you breathe in the faint scent of soil and sweat, mixed with the metallic temps of stone. The rhythm of life here is slow and stubborn, like a march that no one quite believes in, but keeps walking anyway. Asterisk, there is grace in this resilience. People carry what they must, grumble just enough, and still laugh along the road. The pebbles clink in baskets, sounding almost like lullabies when you let your ears soften. As you watch the last group disappear along the dusty bend, the stones sing a gentle chorus behind them, a choir of endurance disguised as ordinary rock. You slip back inside the palace compound, leaving behind the dusty road of weary farmers and their clinking burdens. The courtyard has quieted now, and you find yourself escorted to a smaller, dimly lit hall. Here, the air is heavy with sandalwood, and at the far end of the chamber sit the men in charge of something you never imagined an empire would need. The Imperial Rock Inspectors. Asterisk, yes, you heard that right. A whole team of dignified officials, their robes neatly pressed, their hats stiff and ever dedicated to the surprisingly serious profession of examining rocks. You pause for a moment, taking in the scene. They're hunched over tables like alchemists, squinting at pebbles laid out on silk mats, poking one with the end of a brush, tapping another lightly to gauge its sound, stroking their beards as though the fate of the cosmos hangs on whether this quartz looks more like a goose or an elongated dumpling. Asterisk. An elderly inspector clears his throat gravely and mutters something like, "Ah, yes, this stone reveals a noble sturdiness, though the contour fades to quickly an unsubtle slope. Acceptable, but only for regional tribute." His younger assistant nods furiously, jotting it down as if recording a profound truth. You quietly chuckle. It's like watching a panel of somber judges at a talent show. Only the contestants can't sing, dance, or even move. They're just rocks, standing stiff and uncomplaining under the weight of imperial scrutiny. Asterisk. One inspector even carries a little brass magnifier, peering into the faint cracks of a pebble with such intensity that you half expect him to announce, "Marvelous." This specimen once vacationed in the lower riverbeds before deciding nobly to retire to the imperial court. Another inspects a strangely lumpy stone, hums thoughtfully, and finally concludes, "This one looks like a turnip, a very auspicious turnip." Asterisk, you lean back, suppressing a grin. People risked their backs dragging sacks of rock across miles of roads. And here's someone writing down in delicate calligraphy, stone, turnip-shaped, moderate value. And yet, despite the absurdity, something oddly poetic lingers in the ritual. These officials don't just check stones, they elevate them, giving dignity to what you'd ordinarily trip over on the way to your front door. Asterisk. Historians still debate how seriously these inspectors took themselves. Some argue they must have been secretly laughing under their sleeves, whispering jokes about potatoes while pretending to debate cosmic significance. Others suggest they believed deeply in their sacred duty, convinced that proper classification of rocks secured the empire's harmony. Sadly, the stones themselves remain stubbornly silent about their own evaluations. Asterisk. But as you watch, you notice gentler details. The way a young inspector polishes a smooth pebble with real tenderness, as if wiping dust off a child's face, or the slow rhythm of brushes recording entries into ledgers. The calm scratching of ink that feels almost like rain tapping a roof. You start to realize that this entire inspection is less about logic and more about ritual, a lullaby written in stone and ink, sung softly each day in the halls of bureaucracy. Asterisk. The inspectors themselves drift between comedy and reverence. One yawns so widely that you almost expect him to swallow the pebble he's holding. Another sneezes, scattering neatly lined stones across the mat like startled mice. The others scurry to collect them, carefully comparing each to their notes to ensure no potato-shaped specimens are misplaced. The sight is so mundane yet so absurd it feels strangely calming, like watching your neighbors argue about the best way to fold laundry. Asterisk. You stroll slowly among the tables. The stones glow faintly under oil lamps' veins of crystal catching the light, shadows deepening into mysterious cracks. For moments at a time, you, too, are caught in their stillness. A deep green jade piece looks like a frozen droplet of forest. A pale pebble swirled with bands of cream resembles tiny waves, frozen mid. Suddenly, the inspectors don't seem so ridiculous. If money could take this form, perhaps wealth might feel more beautiful, not cold coins or stiff bills, but small pieces of the earth that whisper stories under your fingers. Asterisk. Of course, the practical part of your mind pipes up again. Yes, but no matter how poetic you make it, you can't buy lunch with a pebble. And you chuckle softly, as if sharing an inside joke with the past itself. Perhaps that's why this story lives on, not because it was efficient, but because it was delightfully absurd. Asterisk. At last, one inspector sets aside his brush and draws in a long breath. This, he declares, holding up a sparkling piece, flecked with gold specks, is perfection. The others lean in, eyes shining with momentary envy. The stone glitters like it knows it has just been crowned monarch of the pebble pile. And you, watching from the corner, let a wave of amusement wash into something gentler. Asterisk. The empire has turned itself into a stage for rocks. Farmers haul them, officials measure them, and an emperor treasures them. And here you stand, lulled by the quiet theater of it all, in the steady glow of oil lamps, in the shuffling of baskets, and in the soft murmurs of scholars describing turnip-shaped pebbles. You feel the rhythm of this odd empire gliding softly around you, like a cradle rocking you toward sleep. You leave the inspector's chamber, their mutterings about turnip-shaped pebbles fading behind you, and re-enter the palace's grand outer hall. The atmosphere changes here. It is brighter, more performative, filled with courtiers parading before one another like proud magpies showing off shiny treasures. If Section 6 was about solemn bureaucracy, Section 7 is about flair, ego, and perhaps a hint of competitive silliness. Asterisk. Nobles are everywhere. Their hands are heavy with trays and silk-wrapped bundles. And what are they proudly carrying? Rocks? Not just any rocks, though. These are tribute stones, excessively presented, with all the ceremony one might expect of jewels or priceless relics. You watch as a nobleman struts with a river pebble the size of his palm, polished until it practically gleams like silver. The corners of his mouth twitch with smugness, as though daring his rivals to top his pebbles' mirror-like sheen. Asterisk beside him, a rival noble unfurls an embroidered cloth to reveal a jagged slab of obsidian that flashes under torchlight with dangerous glimmers. The rival announces with rehearsed grandeur, "This stone reflects both death and eternity." The onlookers murmur appreciatively. You resist the urge to ask out loud, "Doesn't it also reflect your face pretty clearly?" Asterisk. The spectacle continues. Courtiers circulate like collectors at an art fair. One presents a tiny jade stone, shaped like a sleeping rabbit. Another shows off a cluster of quartz crystals, caught together like a frozen choir. The comparisons quickly escalate. Not only are they flaunting the beauty of their chosen stone, but they're also drafting elaborate interpretations. This pebble represents cosmic balance, or this rock holds the essence of imperial destiny. It's like watching a poetry slam where everyone's subject is geology. Asterisk. One noblewoman lifts a smoky quartz nugget and coos, as if it were a beloved pet. Her attendants nod fervently, muttering words like auspicious and serene, with expressions so serious you nearly laugh. Another man unveils his prized stone, one riddled with strange holes, like a piece of cheese petrified by time. The crowd gasps. Apparently, rocks with holes were considered especially lucky symbols of wind flowing through mountains, a representation of openness. He raises it high in triumph, as though he has discovered a portal to some secret, welcoming other world. Asterisk. You notice the social game at work. Each noble outdoes the last, passing judgment not only on stones, but on each other. Status rests not simply on wealth, but on taste in geology. One man is quietly mocked when his rock is deemed too ordinary, just a round pebble, no spiritual resemblance at all. His ears redden as whispers flutter around him. You realize, with some amusement, that in this empire, your dignity could be shattered by the unfortunate blandness of your rock collection. Asterisk. It reminds you of competitive hobbies in the modern world: stamp collecting, wine tasting, sneaker comparisons. The nobles aren't so different. They've simply masked their playful vanity in eloquent rhetoric about cosmic harmony. It's equal parts ridiculous and charming, the way humans can elevate anything, into a contest of pride. Asterisk. Off to the side, a scholar tries to lend seriousness to the spectacle. He insists that noble families with the best stones clearly attract the emperor's favor. Possession of a magnificent tribute stone is no mere vanity, he says. It is a sign of heaven's blessing upon one's household. The courtiers bow slightly in agreement, though you suspect their competitive grins matter more than divine blessings. Asterisk. Historians still debate whether these noble showdowns truly elevated careers in the imperial court. Did the emperor reward these stone-obsessed performances, or was he simply entertained by the parade of shiny objects? Nobody seems entirely sure. Perhaps the emperor cultivated this competition deliberately, letting nobles fuss over geology instead of plotting political turmoil. If so, he might just have been the cleverest ruler in history-keeping, the rich distracted with rocks while running his empire in peace. Asterisk. You wander through the crowd, tracing the fine weave of silk cloths, the gleam of amber beads, the tiny lamps illuminating stones with theatrical effect. Everyone is talking stones, breathing stones, dreaming stones. And oddly, even as you toy with laughter, you feel yourself slipping into their rhythm. Doesn't that small jade rabbit look cuddly? Wouldn't that crystal cluster look dazzling in your own window? There's something soothing about a community, collectively agreeing to obsess over harmless rocks instead of money or war. Asterisk. By the time you pause in the corner, soft music from flutes drifts through the hall. The stones shine beneath lamplight, and the nobles chatter with the kind of fierce energy usually reserved for chess tournaments or word games. Once more, you feel lulled not by the rocks themselves, but by the gentle absurdity of human ambition. At the end of the day, people just want to win even, if the prize is nothing more than a fancier pebble. Asterisk. As the night deepens, the nobles bow out, one by one, their stones submitted by servants to be catalogued with the rest. The hall grows quieter. A final laughter rings out, a noble slyly remarking that someone else's auspicious rock looks like burnt bread. You smile in the shadows, rocking gently in the emberlit silence. The stone contests, though silly, have filled the hall with warmth instead of bitterness, and that is valuable in its own quiet way. The stone competitions of the nobles fade into memory as you walk through another arched gate, guided now by the sound of trickling water and the hush of 1,000 leaves. Lanterns glow faintly ahead, and soon you step into what might be the emperor's favorite place in the entire empire. His gardens of glimmering tribute. Asterisk. It is unlike any garden you've seen. There are trees, yes, their branches swaying in the warm night air, but what captures your gaze are the stones. They rise like sculptures, carefully arranged across the grounds, polished and curated with artful precision. Some are enormous boulders dragged from mountains, positioned on pedestals like gods at ease. Others are tiny pebbles clustered into decorative bowls, forming patterns like constellations, their colors gleaming in the firefly glow of lanterns. It's as if nature herself spent years building an outdoor gallery, only to step back and hand the title deeds to the emperor. Asterisk. You wander slowly down gravel paths lined with flowering shrubs. Torches burn low, illuminating the rocks in soft amber light. Each stone is more dramatic than the last. A pale limestone shaped like a cresting ocean wave. A black volcanic rock with holes like a sponge. A jade boulder polished so patiently that it almost hums against the touch of your palm. Asterisk. This, you realize, is where all those taxes end up. The tribute stones don't sit forgotten in dusty warehouses. They live here, humming quietly in moonlit arrangements, transformed into an enchanted backdrop where the emperor strolls at night in flowing robes, probably congratulating himself on being the greatest collector of geological oddities the world has ever known. Asterisk. The strangest part. It's beautiful, truly. You feel yourself slowed down without noticing, your thoughts stretching like drowsy limbs. Somewhere in the distance, you hear water tumbling, a stream lined with smooth round quartz that glitters like stars trapped in liquid. Tortuous paths weave between small pools, whose rippling surfaces reflect clusters of rock so perfectly that each arrangement doubles, one floating above and one shimmering below. The effect is otherworldly. Stones growing skyward, stones blooming downward, stones whispering to each other through shivering rings of water. Asterisk. Imperial gardeners, you notice, flit quietly around the edges, fussing with bamboo rakes or trimming moss that creeps lovingly over the edges of stones. They appear careful, reverent, as though handling something sacred, and perhaps they are, for these rocks are no longer mere taxes, they are icons, reshaped into art. It feels almost silly to call it a playground of geology, and yet that's truly what this garden is, a cosmic playroom furnished entirely with Earth's bones. Asterisk. Then comes a detail historians often sigh about. These gardens weren't just serene, they were political. To invite foreign dignitaries here was to casually proclaim, "Look at the empire that makes even common rocks divine." Visitors walked among strange stones from rivers and mountains, some imported across entire deserts, others carried with sweat and pain from faraway quarries. Each gleaming formation reminded guests that in this empire, wealth and imagination intertwined. It was subtle bragging, stone by stone. Asterisk. Of course, hilarity lurked behind the grandeur. You imagine the poor workers who had to transport a boulder simply because the emperor declared, "That one looks like a dragon's head." One can picture them pushing with ropes, muttering, "Yes, your majesty, a most dragon-wise shape, very important." definitely worth our sore backs tomorrow. And here you are, centuries later, enjoying the peaceful results of their exhausted labor. The dragon-shaped boulder still sitting smugly in a pond. Asterisk, but the Emperor's garden is more than a display. It's a place of meditation. You pause on a bridge curved like a sleepy smile, gazing at moonlight shimmering across the stone surfaces. There is silence here, but not emptiness. Just the sound of insects humming in tall grass, the splash of fish leaping for a moment's freedom in the pond, and the faint grinding crunch of pebbles under your sandals. Asterisk, it's easy to imagine the Emperor himself, weary from politics, strolling these paths to soothe his thoughts. For him, the rocks represented stability. Unlike advisors, they couldn't disagree. Unlike farmers, they wouldn't grumble. They simply were, eternal and silent, grounding him in cosmic permanence. And even if you raise an eyebrow at his odd taxation scheme, as you breathe in the stillness of this luminous garden, you can't deny he created peace for himself here. Asterisk, historians still debate whether these gardens influenced later traditions of rock appreciation in East Asia gardens where stones represent mountains, or rivers, or the very flow of heaven's order. Perhaps this eccentric emperor planted the seed of such symbolism, or perhaps he was merely another man lost in his hobby, totally unaware that someday his obsession would be reimagined as philosophy. Asterisk, you run your hand across the cool surface of a stone flecked with soft white lines. It feels strangely alive, the way driftwood feels after years at sea. The garden holds you still, almost hypnotically. Maybe, just for tonight, the Emperor's vision works on you too. You find yourself sighing happily, eyelids drooping. Yes, you think, pebbles really can be poetry. The air in the Emperor's garden settles heavy with the perfume of jasmine, and you drift further down its twisting paths, where clusters of tribute stones glimmer in moonlight. At every turn, it feels as if someone has staged an elaborate performance featuring rocks as the only actors. But beyond the beauty, there is something more, an undercurrent of symbolism, of superstition, that stretches its shadow through every pebble and boulder you pass. Court scholars, those tireless explainers of all imperial eccentricities, trail behind you like echoes of the Emperor's imagination. Their voices are hushed, but insistent, each determined to prove that stones are more than what they appear. One gestures toward a smooth jade boulder, as if unveiling a hidden truth. This boulder represents the mountain of immortality. Its presence ensures His Majesty's endless reign. Another scholar points at a hole-riddled limestone rock resting serenely in a pond and declares, "See how air passes freely through its voids. It symbolizes harmony, the breath of the cosmos." You raise an eyebrow, but keep your amusement tucked politely in your sleeves. It's charming, in a way, how far people will go to dignify the whims of power. Yet you can't deny the beauty in their words, either. Each metaphor twists plain geology into something alive. Suddenly, the garden is more than a collection of stones. It is stability, infinity. It is cosmic breath captured in mineral silence. Of course, amid all this solemnity, there are whispers and chuckles too. One official mutters, "That stone looks like my wife's cooking pot. Should I declare it auspicious?" Another, hiding a grin, insists that a certain jagged rock indeed resembles an upside-down duck. They straighten up quickly when a more serious scholar insists that ducks symbolize prosperity. The joke becomes a truth in moments, scribbled into notes for the Emperor's eventual hearing. You nearly laugh aloud. It's how rumors and traditions are born, from a single poor joke retold with enough dignity attached. The Emperor, you're told, believes wholeheartedly in these interpretations. To him, stones are not inert, they are omens caught in solid form. A sharp stone with a pointed tip might signal danger, unrest, the threat of rebels on the horizon. A smooth, round stone, by contrast, is a symbol of peace and harmony. What if the future of the empire was truly balanced on the subtle bulges and curves of quartz from a muddy riverbank? Odd, yes. But tonight, you find the idea strangely comforting. History often feels harsh, full of wars and decrees. You'll happily accept a moment where politics is shaped by the personality of rocks. Historians still wonder whether this symbolic obsession shaped policies beyond taxes. Did the emperor, confronted with an unusually cracked boulder, actually delay battles or reform his court? There are whispers he sometimes canceled audiences after holding a pebble that spoke of poor fortune. It's equal parts mystical and absurd, yet undeniably human. Haven't you, at one time or another, delayed something important just because it didn't feel right? Perhaps this emperor simply elevated that hesitation into cosmic law. As you stroll, fireflies scatter near the ground, their small, glowing bodies weaving in and out of the stone. Arrangements until it looks as if the rocks themselves are exhaling tiny stars. For a moment, it doesn't matter whether these interpretations are true or invented. The symbolism, stability, eternity, rebirth flows into the garden like a lullaby. You breathe slower, your shoulders ease. Every rock you pass begins to feel less like geology and more like a soft secret you've wandered into. You pause at a peculiar formation, an upright boulder with strange white veins running through its dark body. A scholar beside you nods gravely, whispers, "The veins are lightning captured inside stone, power that bends to stillness." You peer closer. Yes, perhaps. Or perhaps it's simply mineral streaks that happen to fall in jagged lines. But you decide not to break the spell. If the emperor sees lightning made patient, why not? It's a kinder fate for lightning, to glow forever without burning anyone's roof. And gently, without realizing it, you slip deeper into the empire's dream. Stones no longer feel like odd taxes, or burdens, or eccentric trophies. They've become charms, omens, reminders that not everything in the world needs utility to exist. Some things simply are, preserved in shape and weight, waiting for us to notice. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to night insects buzzing against the stillness. Somewhere across the garden, the emperor lingers by his favorite boulder, staring at its roundness as if staring into eternity. And whether you take his symbolism seriously or not, there is peace in it. Impermanent humans, meeting permanent stones, both telling themselves stories of what it all means. The gardens drift gently into the background as your feet carry you down a long road leading toward the distant hills. The scent of moss and jasmine fades, replaced by wind carrying the sharper tang of dust and wild grass. You are not alone. Ahead of you stretches a caravan of workers, guards, and frightened donkeys, dragging ropes tied around impossibly large boulders. Welcome now to one of the more strenuous absurdities of this empire. The Imperial Quarry Expeditions. Imagine it a decree sweeping across the provinces. The Emperor desires more stones, rarer stones, stranger stones. Instead of sighing and slipping quietly out the back door, farmers and laborers march off toward mountain quarries and riverbed. With pickaxes, chisels, and more optimism than you think wise, they begin the hunt. A fresh kind of treasure hunt, except the prize is heavy, fragile, and very much immovable. The scene is strangely theatrical. Men pound chisels into the base of a cliff, chips flying like fragments of stars. The giant hunk resists stubbornly, groaning under each strike. Yet the workers persist, sweating, shouting, ropes straining, until the stone finally releases a sigh of earth and collapses free. Cheers rise for only a moment, till everyone remembers. Now we have to move this thing. You can practically see the regret glistening alongside their sweat. Historians note how elaborate the logistics became. Truly colossal stones were floated down rivers on barges, some breaking the boats in half, forcing fishermen to push splintered beams downstream like forgotten toothpicks. Others dragged across roads on timber rollers left grooves, so deep they still scarred the ground centuries after the empire faded. And for what? So the emperor could have one more rock that looked like a sleeping ox. Practical? Not at all. Beautiful. In its own weird, yes. Asterisk at one such quarry. You pause to watch an overseer squinting critically at a freshly cut block of marble. His brows pressed together. He tilts his head. He gestures right, then left, then sighs, and declares. The top corner points too sharply. It feels impatient. Back to work. Somewhere behind him, a worker mutters under his breath, I feel impatient, too. You smother a laugh and suspect the commentary has repeated through generations. Asterisk among the workers, though, is also pride. One younger man, face sunlit with determination, brushes smooth a chunk of jade larger than himself. His grin is so wide you almost believe he has found treasure, and perhaps he has. For once, his work will not simply stock the empire with grain or lumber. It will rest in the palace gardens, admired under moonlight, turned from rough quarry-born lump to a fragment of eternity. Asterisk, of course, there was danger too. You hear the distant rumble of a landslide, the nearly imperceptible groans of stone giving way from tired cliffs. Workers shout warnings, scatter like startled birds, then brush themselves off, returning dutifully to the chisels. Historians still wonder how many of these expeditions bent too close to disaster. And yet, the records are often vague, leaving behind only hints. A collapse here, a drowned barge there. The rocks were silent witnesses, incapable of judgment. Immovable reminders. Asterisk from your vantage point. The expeditions reveal something about human stubbornness. There is no logic in spending weeks, even months, dragging a rock across hundreds of miles to please an emperor's whimsy. And yet, out of duty, loyalty, and perhaps a resigned shrug, people made it happen. You watch them wrestle ropes around another boulder, their muscles tight, the rhythm of grunts and heaving breaths oddly hypnotic. The empire, it seems, runs, not on rice or coin, but on sheer willpower and, maybe very sore backs. Asterisk night falls, and the expedition pauses at a camp. Workers sit around fires, their faces glowing orange. They eat what little food they packed, joking tiredly about how the emperor better start appreciating rocks shaped like cabbages, because that's what they mostly find. One man holds up a chunk of stone in the firelight. Doesn't it look like a dumpling? He asks proudly. The others laugh, and suddenly they're all pointing stones at one another, calling out foods, animals, everyday objects. Even in exhaustion, humor smooths the edges of absurdity. Asterisk, you recline among them, sipping from a gourd of water, the night air humming with cicadas. All around, the mountains loom, patient and silent, their bodies bristling with stones untouched. The stars stretch endlessly above, cold and steady cosmic stones hung in sky-dark riverbeds. The workers' laughter blends with night's chorus, and you sense it, above politics, above whimsy, above taxation. This work is also a reminder of humanity's bizarre but enduring drive. We follow strange visions, even when they drag us into valleys under one-ton burdens. Asterisk, and here, stone by stone, the emperor's dreams spread straight from mountain and river to palace. Ridiculous and exhausting, yes, but also strangely moving. You close your eyes for a beat, and the sound of chisels in your imagination turns into the soft lull of a carpenter's rhythm, like a cradle rocking the whole country into bed. The expedition camps fade behind you as dawn spreads across the horizon, light as soft as milk poured over stone. You rise into the rhythm of travelers on another road, not peasants now, not quarry laborers, but merchants. Wagons creak under their weight, and banners flap lazily in the breeze. Here come the stones of the empire's trade routes, arriving from lands beyond its borders. Asterisk, you walk alongside them, trailing your fingers against bundles wrapped carefully in cloth or straw. Wagons packed with rocks that have traveled farther than you ever imagined. Rocks could bother to travel. From Central Asia, polished agates sparkle in stripes of cream, red, and amber, some sliced thin to show off their delicate rings, like tree trunks frozen into gems. From the dusty roads of India arrive speckled jaspers, one chunk speckled so neatly it looks suspiciously like a star map, as if an entire night sky had been compressed into a pebble. From the Silk Road caravans, lapis lazuli appears, its blue so deep it seems the merchants have broken the heavens into shards and put them up for sale. Asterisk, the emperor's love of stone, it appears, has pushed beyond his borders, turning the trade networks into glittery rivers of geology. You pause to peer inside a merchant's chest, where a smooth orb of obsidian reflects your own tired face. The merchant grins knowingly, clearly aware that buyer squinting into rocks is now a perfectly normal pastime. Traveled far, he says with pride. You nod, deciding he's probably talking about the rock, but maybe also about himself. Asterisk, you listen as traders share dramatic tales to increase each stone's value. One assures the guards nearby that his rock came from a mountain struck by thunder so fierce the cliff wept molten tears that hardened into black volcanic glass. Another swears his stone has protective powers against betrayal at court, though you suspect he made that one up after watching a noble cough suspiciously during negotiations last week. Still, the stories work. You can't resist their charm. Each rock becomes more than matter, it becomes a talisman, a small, portable myth, carried by horse hooves and sandal straps across continents. Asterisk. Historians still debate just how these foreign stones filtered into the emperor's garden. Was the trade spontaneous, merchants eager to exploit his odd tastes? Or did the emperor deliberately request these foreign minerals to weave the empire's prestige into wider myths? It's never quite clear, and maybe that's the joy of it. Each stone is a mystery itself, its true story blurred by the gossip of roads, layered with legend. Asterisk, the caravan creaks forward, wheels groaning like old storytellers, and you catch the sound of bells tied to camels, their low grumbles blending with the ring of metal. There is something peaceful about this absurd dichotomy humming across the continent. Nobody here speaks of grain prices or silver shortages. Instead, arguments revolve around whether one merchant's striped pebble looks more like a tiger's fur or a badly cooked pancake. One merchant insists that his jade is certainly luckier than the other man's, because it sparkled more during a thunderstorm. The other merchant counters firmly that luck can't be proven under bad weather. You bite the inside of your cheek to stop laughing. These are the debates holding the world together tonight. Asterisk, at a stop in a dusty town, you fall into step with a group unloading a particularly large shipment. Quilted cloth is untied, revealing colorful stones glowing dully in the morning haze. Children come running, giggling loudly and pointing, their fingers coated with flour from bakeries. An audience of sticky They gaze at the lapis lazuli especially, their eyes widening at the impossible blue. The rumor quickly spreads. This rock is made of sky itself. You see one boy lick it experimentally, only to scrunch his nose in disgust. No, the sky, it seems, does not taste good. Still, the rumor will go on. Asterisk, as afternoon shadows lengthen, you resume walking toward the heart of the empire, the wagons trailing dust like parchment unrolling behind them. Ahead, you picture the emperor awaiting these stones, his eyes gleaming with the kind of anticipation collectors always have when a new shipment arrives. For him, each glittering arrival will whisper, "Our borders are wide. Our reach extends far into deserts and beyond mountains. Rocks, for all their stillness, are proof of how far humans wander." Asterisk, and you, wandering with them, feel your steps grow heavy in the rhythm of hooves, wheels, bells, and dust. Trade in coins seems harsh, trade in silk too fragile, but trade in stones, that feels sturdy. Each rock clinks in rhythm with your heartbeat, a soft percussion of permanence traveling across the land. Asterisk, at night, the wagons halt under a horizon thick with stars. Fires crackle, bellies rumble, tired men sing. The stones sit quietly in their bundles, glowing faintly as firelight sneaks through cracks. For a moment, it looks like the earth itself is exhaling its treasures in the middle of a lonely road. Asterisk. And so, from rivers to mountains, from caravans to ports, the Emperor's strange passion spreads wider than you ever thought it might. A passion both impractical and wondrous, leaving you swaying, lulled by the gentle rattle of wagons, into a sense of timelessness. The caravans of foreign stones fade from view, their wheels groaning into distance. When you find yourself in a quieter courtyard where gossip flutters more loudly than birds, tonight, the subject isn't just the Emperor's latest acquisitions. It's the reactions from other courts, neighboring rulers, and rival kings. Yes, welcome to one of the Empire's strangest side effects, the curious case of rival courts. Asterisk. The air smells faintly of ink and tea as advisors shuffle scrolls outlining foreign envoys' reactions. Imagine walking into a diplomatic meeting where gifts are exchanged, fine silks for one emperor, ivory carvings for another, and then representatives from your court proudly announce, "Our emperor collects rocks." The silence that follows must have been delicious. Asterisk. Some neighbors mocked openly, whispered jokes trickled across borders. Perhaps their treasury is built from the nearest gravel pit. One ruler, it is said, requested to send his cousins unused garden stones instead of gold, just to see if they'd be accepted. The rumor continues that yes, they were, provided they were at least polished. You lean back beneath the lantern glow, laughing softly to yourself. Only in this empire could tax policy inspire punchlines abroad. Asterisk. And yet, ridicule was never the whole story. Rivals who first mocked the strange policy later found themselves strangely intrigued. Was this eccentric taste, or subtle brilliance? One envoy noted, with no small amount of awe, that the emperor had removed greed from tribute by removing silver. After all, no corrupt official could easily pocket a 20-pound rock to spend quietly at a tavern. If anything, the empire's coffers were safer when filled with minerals no thief dared break his back over. In this light, the emperor suddenly seemed rather clever. Asterisk. Still, others copied him badly. A neighboring ruler tried demanding seashells as tax. The concept floundered when everyone realized seashells rot and crumble not, quite ideal for impressing guests at the royal court. Another imitated the idea with feathers, filling storerooms that soon smelled like wet poultry. Stones, though impractical, at least endured. Asterisk. Historians still wonder whether mocking rivals turned quiet admirers over time. Records mention at least one emissary returning home with a slightly embarrassing enthusiasm for rocks. His own people found him kneeling before a riverbank, muttering about which stone was worthy of their kingdom. You can almost picture his wife tapping her foot behind him. "You've spent 3 hours sorting pond pebbles. Please stop embarrassing us." Asterisk. Even foreign traders took part in this fascination. They returned to their homelands, bragging of the stone palace, exaggerating into myths, mountains carved into cities of glitter, courtiers who slept on beds of jade, entire throne rooms tiled with lapis lazuli floors. Over time, other cultures told fables of a distant emperor who held dominion not over men, but over rocks, a ruler who commanded the earth itself to bend into his garden. Asterisk. Back in the courtyard, the jesting among officials grows sharper. One scribe lifts a pebble from the ground and holds it toward the torchlight. With grave parody, he declares, "Behold, the Emperor of Stones." Laughter prickles and whispers until a stern superior clears his throat, reminding them that such humor is only funny when the Emperor isn't listening. Still, you can see the twinkle in more than one advisor's eyes as they tuck their amusement away for safekeeping. Asterisk. You stroll further, pondering a broader truth. Ridicule and imitation often march together. Today's absurdity becomes tomorrow's philosophy. The stone tax may have appeared foolish to foreign courts, But isn't that the same tone every great innovation receives at first? Perhaps the emperor wasn't simply eccentric, maybe. He set his empire apart in the only way he knew how. Asterisk, the night air grows cooler, the courtyard quieter. Lantern smoke thins and rises, carrying the laughter of those who mocked, the curiosity of those who imitated, and the stillness of stones themselves. As you run your hand along the palace wall, its chill seeping into your skin. You realize, rival courts may have ridiculed, but centuries later, you're here remembering the emperor. Who remembers the rivals? Their feathers rotted, their shells crumbled, but his stones remain. Asterisk, asterisk, the laughter of rival courts fades like incense smoke as night deepens. You wander down a quieter lane, toward the storyteller's quarter, where words, not decrees, shape memory. Torches glow, children sit cross-legged, attendants lean half asleep, and an old storyteller clears his throat. He holds no scripts, just a polished pebble in his left hand, a humble, river-worn thing. He begins to speak softly, and the crowd hushes. Asterisk, over time, the stone taxes ceased to be only a policy. They grew into legends, myths so entwined with daily life that people could no longer tell where truth ended and imagination began. You settle onto a bench, letting the old man's voice carry you into their world. Asterisk. One legend says, each stone submitted as tribute came alive at night, whispering secrets of the empire into the emperor's ears. Some stones told stories of distant mountains where they were born, of rivers that had cradled them for centuries, of ancestors who had passed them from palm to palm. People swore that's why the emperor often sat in silence among his collection, because he wasn't just gazing, he was listening. Each pebble, they believed, spoke in its own voice, sometimes telling truths, sometimes half-lies, much like courtiers themselves. Asterisk, another tale, insists that when the palace grew still after midnight, the stones rose into the air like fireflies, hovering for a moment before settling again into their places. That's why, the old man says, winking at the children, palace guards never fell asleep on duty. They were too busy keeping boulders from floating away. The children giggle, and even you find your lips curling at the thought of a jade boulder lazily drifting toward the moon. Asterisk, historians, of course, would sigh. They'd insist that stones did no such thing, that whispering pebbles and flying boulders were tales spun to pacify restless villagers. And maybe they'd be right, but the charm of myths lies less in their truth than in their warmth. For ordinary people, who rarely glimpsed the emperor's gardens themselves, the tales transformed unreachable stones into friendly neighbors of the imagination. Asterisk, there's another legend, softer than the rest, about a farmer too poor to choose a fine stone for tribute. One day, his daughter picked up a humble gray pebble from their fields. "It looks like you, father," she said, stubborn, heavy, but kind. With a sheepish shrug, he delivered it to the palace. Strangely enough, the emperor kept it close, calling it a rock of honest labor. Over time the story spread, comforting the poor. Even plain pebbles, if given truthfully, could be as treasured as jewels. Asterisk, and then there are the darker whispers. Some villagers claimed cursed stones crept into the collections, harboring bad luck. People muttered that if the emperor ever touched a stone carved by malicious spirits, calamities would befall the palace. Others said, rival rulers sent trick stones into caravans as sabotage rocks designed to shatter when struck, symbolizing weakness disguised as strength. Historians still wonder if these were cautionary stories or genuine fears threading through ordinary lives. Either way, they reveal how deeply these stones had seeped into daily imagination. Asterisk, you tilt your head, lulled almost to sleep by the rhythm of the old storyteller's voice. He draws pictures in the air as he speaks. Here, a river flowing. Here, a mountain cracking. Here, countless stars dissolving to become a pebble in your palm. His audience sways with his words, the night thick with the clinking rattle of stones, gently rubbed in restless hands, carried his charms and tokens long after taxes were counted. Asterisk, why do people cling to such stories? Perhaps because rocks endure. Long after grain rots, rope frays, palaces crumble, stones remain. They lend themselves to myth-making simply by existing so stubbornly. Humans, ephemeral and impatient. Look at them and whisper, there must be something more inside you. Asterisk. You let your gaze fall onto the pebble in the storyteller's palm. It glimmers weakly in the lantern light, utterly ordinary and completely magical. Maybe it really is whispering, just too quietly for you to hear. Or maybe the whisper comes not from the stone, but from the centuries of voices wrapped around it. Emperors, farmers, children, rivals all, leaving their stories behind. Asterisk, the storyteller lowers his hand at last. Silence stretches out, comfortable and long. Then, faintly, a cricket starts its night song. The crowd disperses, yawning, smiling, the children still clutching their lucky pebbles as though carrying pieces of the myth home in their sleeves. You walk away slowly, the night cool around your shoulders, eyes heavy, heart calm. The legends float within you like fireflies refusing to dim. Asterisk, asterisk, the storyteller's voices dissolve into the night, and when you next wander into the palace grounds, it feels quieter. The stones are still here, of course, stacked carefully and gleaming faintly in moonlight, but the bustle is gone. The emperor himself, once sharpened and full of fascination, is older now. Wrinkles cross his face like the cracks of his beloved rocks. His steps are slower, measured, yet his gaze still gleams as brightly as the polished jade scattered around him. Asterisk, he has grown frail, but his obsession, no, his devotion to the stones has only deepened. Courtiers bow, bringing new tribute stones every day, even when he doesn't ask. It has become second nature, as though the empire itself can't stop the rhythm it was set, moving toward so many years ago. What began as one man's eccentricity is now a tradition too rooted to untangle, even as his body falters. Asterisk, inside the palace storerooms, vast piles of tribute stones grow, stacked higher and higher, until it feels as though some glittering avalanche waits just one sneeze away from swallowing the scribes. Polished jade, volcanic glass, marbled granite, all lying still, indifferent to the frailty of the man who once demanded them. Attendants shuffle nervously in these rooms, whispering practical worries. What will happen when he is gone? Will the next emperor want the same? Nobody knows. Historians whisper it still. Succession rarely makes room for hobbies. Asterisk, you watch the emperor pause on a veranda, his robes heavy around his thin shoulders. He picks up a single stone from the table, an ordinary one, plain gray and smooth. His thumb rubs the surface with absent comfort, as though reminding himself of permanence, of patience. It's not the fanciest rock from his collection, nor the most auspicious, but it is in his hand. Perhaps this is what mattered all along, the closeness of something steady against the tremors of age. Asterisk, behind him, scholars still scribble frantic notes, trying to encode meaning into every rock in his collection. This stone symbolizes eternal power, insists one. No, argues another. This one shows the empire's unity. You smile quietly, noticing that in truth, these piles of stone may symbolize nothing anymore except memory itself. They are remnants of a life's odd devotion, destined to outlive the man who gave them meaning. Asterisk, and yet, there is something profoundly gentle in the image. What ruler do you know who clings not to gold or conquest, but to the still comfort of stones? He has lived his reign surrounded by their silence, their uncomplaining presence, their quiet promise to remain. You wonder if perhaps this emperor found a wisdom more subtle than his contemporaries. Understood that eternity is not in wealth or victory, but in small fragments of the world we pretend to own, even though they owned themselves long before us. Asterisk historians still debate whether the stone tax weakened his empire, diverting energy from practical needs. Others argue it created stability, distracting nobles and calming unrest by turning ambition into contests of pebbles rather than blades. But what cannot be debated is its endurance in stones gathered patiently in gardens, storerooms, and courtyards, still whispering long after the emperor himself leans too tired to walk alone. Asterisk, you notice, too, the muted worry in the faces of the courtiers. Their voices tremble, their postures stiff, because they sense change is near. What becomes of habits when the one who created them departs? Will the stones be abandoned, scattered, perhaps forgotten? Or will they be absorbed into myth permanently? Too heavy to discard, too strange to explain. Asterisk, the emperor's hand lingers on his plain gray stone. His eyes close briefly, and in that fragile moment, the vast empire shrinks down to one truth. Even mountains will someday wear away, but for now, this pebble will remain in his palm. He breathes slower, as if already leaning toward the silence that stones embody so effortlessly. Asterisk, you step back, your own heart softened by the scene. The empire hums. Beyond, farmers still toil, nobles still bicker, merchants still spin myths, but here in the palace, time slows to almost nothing. The emperor sits among his mountains of glittering silence, a frail body lit by lamps, and you realize he has accomplished something deeply human. He has filled his days with something to hold, something steady, something that, no matter what else happens, doesn't slip away too fast. The halls are quiet now. The rustle of silk robes and the scratch of court scribes have gone to bed, leaving you to wander mostly alone. The emperor, frail and distant, remains behind in his chamber, a single lamp glowing faintly over his hands as he runs one last finger along the stone he has chosen to keep near him tonight. You step out into the deserted courtyards, where the air is cool and the moon hangs high and round, perfectly content to cast its glow on the mountains of stones scattered everywhere. Asterisk, they rise around you now in heaps and arrangements. Tribute stones from decades of collection, thousands upon thousands of minerals held still and silent in the open air. The gardens are more silent than ever. No footsteps grind the gravel, no servants rustle through the paths. You have only cicadas, the sigh of distant bamboo in the wind, and yourself gazing upward at the moon. Its silver light catches on jade, obsidian, limestone, quartz, and so many nameless pebbles, each one twinkling faintly, as if trying to mimic the heavens. Asterisk, for the first time, you see them not as taxes, not as burdens carried by farmers, nor trophies flaunted by nobles, nor amusements debated by scholars. Tonight, they feel like a collective meditation. Every stone is a thought, a worry, a hope, an odd glance back at a moment when someone stooped down and chose this particular rock from the earth. Stones, shaped by rivers, mountains, hammers, and now by stories, have stacked themselves into a monument larger than any single man. Asterisk, you tilt your head and wonder, why do humans keep looking for meaning in what doesn't need it? A rock is a rock, indifferent, patient, and yet here you are, surrounded by thousands of little stories woven into their surfaces. Did the emperor truly find permanence in the moor? Was he simply afraid of impermanence itself? Did the people obey because of fear, or because they too, subconsciously, recognized the strange comfort of holding something eternal in their hands? Historians still argue over it, but one truth is undeniable. The rocks outlast the arguments. They will sit here long after both sides of the debate have crumbled away. Asterisk, as you drift through the moonlit courtyard, the piles almost resemble landscapes of their own. A mountain range of granite rises to your left, curving like sleeping backs under pale light. To your right is a miniature canyon of limestone, its hollow holes glowing faintly like lanterns. Ahead, obsidian glitters so brightly you think for a moment you're staring into a lake of black water. You walk among them slowly, sleepily, as though wandering through the Empire's second, quieter kingdom, the kingdom of stones. Asterisk, your feet crunched lightly through gravel. Every step a soft percussion, joining the nighttime chorus. The wind teases strands of your hair, and gently knocks two rounded pebbles together on the ground. They make the faintest clink, like glasses raised in a toast. You smile at the sound. The Empire, perhaps without meaning to, created the first golden orchestra, not of instruments, but of stones humming together under endless skies. Asterisk, the courtyards stretch on. You imagine the Emperor someday gone, the stones left to outlast him. Perhaps future generations will find some buried under earth, washed into rivers again, or simply chipped and used in new walls. Or perhaps, by some odd grace of human fondness for eccentricity, they will remain. Whole gardens and warehouses of them, waiting quietly, turning an unusual tax into a monument too strange to dismantle. Long after palaces rot, stones rest. Asterisk, and here, you pause. Surrounded by endless stillness, you feel your own breath deepen. The stones no longer seem eccentric or ridiculous. They feel like companions. Reminders of how fleeting human desire is compared to the earth's patience. You lean against a pile, smooth and cold, and gaze again at the moon. In silence, a quiet realization arrives. Maybe permanence was never found in the Emperor's rule. Maybe the permanence was this moment itself. Stones don't vanish, but neither do the stories poured into them. If only someone remembers to listen. Asterisk, you exhale long, your body heavy, your lids warm, and you surrender to the quiet. The stones glimmer, the moon watches, and the night folds the Empire into sleep. Asterisk, and now, dear listener, the story has slowed itself into stillness. You've walked the roads where farmers once dragged their pails. You've chuckled with nobles comparing potato-shaped treasures. And you've lingered in moonlit gardens where stones stood like silent companions. You've watched years drift, emperors age, and myths grow wild, all turning back, always, to the quiet patience of rocks. Asterisk, so let's soften now, set aside the bustling courts, the weary caravans, the arguments of scholars. Set them all down, like stones from tired shoulders. Feel your own body do the same. Shoulders loosen, jaw unclenches, chest lifts slower, gentler. Asterisk, inhale deeply through your nose. Let the air glide in, cool and steady, filling your lungs without rush. Hold it there for a beat, like a stone resting in your palm. Then let it tumble back out with a long, calming exhale. Again, a slow breath, easing yourself into rhythm with the stillness around you. Asterisk, the stones you've walked among all night still shimmer in imagination. They rest patiently, their surfaces smooth and eternal, as if sighing lullabies to cradle you toward rest. Picture them now, beneath the moon, piles of soft gray, jade green, and obsidian black, glowing faintly. They hum without sound, a steady reminder that the world keeps its heartbeat quiet and constant. Asterisk, notice how everything slows here, your mind, your breath, even time itself. What was once bustling chatter reduces to a single steady hush, the sound of the earth waiting, the sound of permanence wrapping gently around impermanence. Asterisk, allow your eyes to grow heavy. Allow yourself, like the Emperor long ago, to sit surrounded by calm stones. No pressure, no duties, just their quiet companionship. Their silence is yours too. Their stillness is already under your skin. Asterisk, and so, let yourself sleep, gently and fully, held by the patience of the world.